Very good to be with you.
Well, do you know what? As soon as I saw this story, the first thing I did was think of your book, having read it this summer. And I say it's just an absolute stonking book. And as I've tweeted out, I think it should be on be required reading for everyone in the entire country. Certainly, every politician should read your book. Because this, I think, is extraordinary. Is that this scale of illegal immigration to Europe it's on such a scale. Thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And I just find it extraordinary that this is something that makes a sort of news in brief at the bottom of, page 4 of a newspaper. Why are we not focused on this as a major issue affecting our continent?
One reason is that it's become just the background noise of our time. The idea that basically the borders of our continent don't exist, that there are no external borders, is commonplace. People now literally just walk into the continent. They just get a boat, and then they get taken onto an NGO boat, and they just are in our continent. And this is just, our thinking is all gone wrong on this. And by the way, there was a word which I almost used there, which you used, and which every press report uses, which is that these people have been rescued. They haven't been rescued. They've been picked up by our own continent's vessels, by organized vessels paid for by taxpayers across our continent, and by NGO vessels. And they are in no way rescued. They are being rescued from Africa. They are getting on boats with very, very short distances to cover in the case
do
of
they
weather
know
like
that
this.
when they get on those boats? Because we've heard so many stories of people, they've paid to get on a boat. They don't realise there's going to be 100 people on a 30-person vessel, and they're terrified, but they're told you don't get your money back, and you're going to be stuck here otherwise. They get on with their kids, pregnant, and terrible situations. I mean, they are in that sense victims of the traffickers, even though they know what they're doing is illegal.
They are complicit with the traffickers. They are paying the traffickers. They're involved in an illegal business, and they are paying to illegally enter our continent, to break our own rules, which are in place. I mean, we don't follow them, but we do actually have rules about who can claim asylum and how you claim it and so on. And it doesn't involve paying a criminal gang to illegally enter Europe. So, I mean, I have a problem with the whole way we've begun to think about this. People say we're rescuing these people. We are lifting people from Africa and bringing them into our continent with no idea of who they are or whether they have any legitimate claim to be in Europe.
Now, of course, this problem, and it is, I mean, again, by any stretch of the imagination, this is a problem. Huge migration of people using criminal traffickers is a problem by any sane person's definition of that word. This has been going on for a number of years. It particularly got worse after Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, said, come on in, the water's lovely, open doors. Hundreds of thousands of people started trekking across Europe. And a lot more people died as a result because people heard the message went out loud and clear. Once you can get onto, you just put your foot on that first bit of rock, or even just get if your dinghy can get into international waters and you're picked up by an EU or NGO vessel, you will have access to the land of milk and honey. It got worse. Now, Australia had a very different policy when they were dealing with this sort of on-sea crisis a few years ago. Tell us a little bit about what Australia did and whether you think that is a policy that we should follow in the EU.
Yes, it's a very interesting case. I go into it in my book, The Strange Death of Europe, that a few years ago, the Australians had a similar-ish case. They had a much smaller number of people trying to get into Australia in a similar fashion and across a much larger expanse of water. But the Australians took the view that they, like Europe, have an asylum system in place which people can apply for. It's not easy. It's not easy to get in. That's because Australia believes it can't take in the entire world. But a few years ago, when this started, the Australian authorities had a choice. They could either continue to maintain their own laws, or they could allow their laws to all be broken, and they chose to maintain them. And one of the ways they did that was to ensure that the boats that were heading towards the country illegally were turned around or diverted onto territories which were not Australian territory. And this is something I say in my book as one of my recommendations that we have to do in Europe, and we are mad if we do not, which is to make sure that we do not work out who is in our continent once they are in. We work out who people are, what their claims are, and keep them outside Europe in the process. Keep them in North Africa. This is, I think it's very important to say, this is not a new phenomenon. I write in my book of this happening with Spain in the 1990s. What is new is that Europeans today, and I include Britain in this, do not have the societal fortitude to maintain our own laws. And this down the road is a catastrophe. If we do not maintain our own laws, everybody will break them for us.
But this is the thing, isn't it? There doesn't seem to be any political will, whether it's the EU, whether it's the leaders of many of our nation states, although it's interesting that lots of the Eastern European national leaders have said, send a clear message to Brussels and to Angela Merkel. No, we're not taking quotas. No, we're not willing to play this game. We've got enough problems to deal with. Thank you. But this seems to go against what the national feeling is. I mean, we had this with David Cameron over the number of, let's say, Syrian migrants that we should take in this country. And he was widely castigated across the political spectrum, in the media, in the political establishment, for agreeing to take only a few thousand over 5 years. And when they did the polling, pretty much 2/3, 3/4 of the public went, "Yep, that's fine," or they thought he'd agreed to take too many. The British public, and indeed the public in the EU, seem to feel rather differently about this issue than their politicians.
Yes, and what's really interesting is it has provided a magnificent opportunity for pseuds and hypocrites and grandstanders to have their moment. The SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon, said she would even take in some migrants. Sorry, that was 2 years ago, and she doesn't seem to have her family of migrants with her. Labour MPs, Yvette Cooper, said she would take in a family of migrants. Endless people have
Bob
claimed...
Geldof, Lily Allen,
None of them have got them. Lily Allen has still not got her group of young men from sub-Saharan Africa living in her spare room. These people are grandstanding on a massive scale about a continent-wide catastrophe, and they should feel enormous shame if they could. The point is here is that we have to look at the whole problem in its totality. The point is, can we take in all of the world who wants to come to our continent? And if you ask a grandstander like Lily Allen or Yvette Cooper or Nicola Sturgeon, they will not, when put on the spot, say keep anyone out. They can't. They won't do it. In reality, if we followed the advice of those people, we would destroy our entire societies, because Africa, among other things, at the moment, has a massive population boom coming. And if you say, and because this is not about Syrian migrants, most of the people coming are not Syrians. If you look at the boatloads coming into Spain at the moment, they are all sub-Saharan African men, very nearly all sub-Saharan African men. And if we say you can come in this year, then more people will come next year, and more the year after, and more the year after that. And the public know that. The public are sensible. It is only the people who have a voice in the media and our politicians who are the ones who are insane.
But this is the thing. The polling has been really clear on this. The public have spoken on this. Why do the politicians, do they think, I mean, again, are we back to Brexit? They just think we're wrong?
Well, I think it is. I think there is one legitimate explanation, which is that put on the spot, this is undoubtedly a very, very big problem. I've travelled to all the places. I've spoken to many, many migrants. There's no doubt about it. When you stare this problem in the face, it is a very, very significant and heartrending problem. But we have to be able to think beyond the terms of sheer short-term emotionalism. There are lots of things. Speak to somebody who's been convicted of a crime, and you're likely to feel some sympathy for them. Does that mean that they shouldn't have been convicted of the crime? Of course not. We feel sympathy for things, and yet there are also things that are the right thing to do in spite of us feeling sympathy. We feel sympathy for people who want to flee far, far worse socioeconomic circumstances than any of us can imagine. We feel sympathy for those people. But it is another thing entirely to say, and as a result, these people should all come in and live in my country or live in my continent. I think that politicians and the other grandstanders on this are just hoping that they can get by in their careers. They can look not so bad in their time, and somebody else will have to deal with it all down the road. But the public know, we know, that it's us that's going to have to deal with it. It's us who have to pay the taxes to accommodate the problems that this throws up. It's us who has to see a massive set of societal problems and live with them. And our politicians, I think, just hope to escape it for another day, another month, another year. But they're building a problem for our continent, which we're all going to have to live with, and the next generations are going to have to live with in perpetuity.